Hey y'all, Chase here from the Cruiser Cult. Today we'll be talking about the SD40 and D40 carburetors found on the early 60s FJ40s. So, cheers to Saturday. Georgetown Brewing, Johnny Utah Pale Ale today. So, let's get into it. All right, so pretty excited to have a nice example of an SD40 carburetor for the first time in my life in my possession, and next to a nice D40 carburetor here. And we'll get off, start talking about the history of the SD40 carburetor, some of the features, and some things to look out for when you're looking for one of these. And then we'll talk about the technical differences between the SD40 and the D40 carburetor here, the Toyota replacement for the SD40. So, the SD40 here, Toyota started speccing these on the 20 series and the 40 series starting in 1958, and they ran until 1967. So a good 9-year run there. And there was only one real change that came to the SD40 carburetors across that time span, and that's in 1964. So 58 to 64, there's an internal metering rod in here that had a tapered design. And from 65 to 67, that metering rod was different, actually had a stepped design. So, you know, that's an important point for someone looking for a rebuild kit or doing a rebuild. But more importantly, what more people care about is the change in the color of the blue plate, or the plate that's normally behind this window. So some of you may know and some may not, but there's normally supposed to be a branded ASIN plate behind this window here. So from 58 to 64, that plate had a really cool blue color. So look in the window, there'd be a nice big blue plate back there that said ASIN. And then from 65 to 67, it had a gray colored plate. So still really cool, not as visually striking as the blue plate special there. But, you know, those are all the real minor differences over that 9-year run. However, you know, you're getting in these carburetors today, you know, everyone wants one of these SD40 carburetors now for their period correct restoration. And oftentimes, you know, you find one of these carburetors, that plate is missing, unfortunately. So, you know, they get lost to time. Someone doing a rebuild in the past didn't think much of it, either, you know, lost it or tossed it, or, you know, sometimes I heard that those carb dips can be especially harsh, and they can actually strip the paint off the branded plate that's normally supposed to go behind the glass. So that's unfortunate. But, you know, those plates are actually large, you know, just window dressings. They don't functionally need to be there. So if you find an SD40 carburetor, and even if it doesn't have the nice pretty blue or gray plate behind the window, it's still going to work great. It still looks really cool. You know, these carburetors, when they're cleaned up, they really have that really cool period correct look to them. You know, if you look at other 60s carbs, like the Nikki carbs for Nissans, or like the Holley 1904 carb from the era, they have those really cool giant glass fuel bowls. So it's really neat to see the fuel pour in here while the engine's running. So yeah, really cool carburetors. Not a lot changed over the 9 years except that blue plate. So, another interesting point about the early versus the later SD40s is actually this zinc body here. The early ones actually had a yellow chromate coating, so some of them you can still see like a golden hue to the bodies here. But apparently in 65 to 67, I think it was just this straight zinc alloy body here. Now, talking about the zinc alloy, that gets us into kind of our first issue to look for when you're looking for one of these SD40s, and that's the warped fuel bowl. So these are not like pure aluminum. It's a high zinc content, so it's a little lower melting point, a little softer than aluminum. And so over time, that big flat metal plate, the actual fuel bowl body behind the window here, can actually get concave. And so where it meets the air horn here at the top, it's not a good seal, so it can cause some leakage there, and the carb won't work as well. So when you go and rebuild it, that's something to look for and be cognizant of. And I only know of one guy in the country that does a really nice job repairing that, and that's Mark at Mark's Off-Road down in SoCal. So if you have one of these SD40s, you know, he's really the guru on rebuilding these things. I also read that getting this glass off, you have to be really careful getting the trim and the glass off the rubber gasket behind. So something to be aware of. The great thing is rebuild kits are still available for these. And again, you know, be cognizant of that year change. The early ones had a different metering rod inside. And also careful getting the rebuild kit for this one when you really need the one for this one. So they're very similar, but there's a difference on the inside that, you know, it makes it important. So, and so in 1967, Toyota stopped making these carbs, and you can date your carb if you want to know what year yours is between 1958 and 1967 by turning the carb around here and looking at the serial number that's stamped on the back. So this one has a 6, a C, and a 5 stamped into it. And so what that tells us is that the first number is the year, so 1966. The C is March, third letter in the alphabet, third month in the year. So March, and then the 5 is the 5th. March 5th, 1966. This SD40 carburetor was spec'd on FJ40, so that's really cool. Now, post-67, Toyota went to the D40 carburetor, and a lot of the ones that they spec'd on the 68 and early 69 FJ40s had actually a fuel cutoff solenoid mounted right here. Now this one doesn't, and there's no provision to mount one, and that's because this SD40 variant is meant to be a factory replacement for the SD40, which never had an electronic fuel cutoff solenoid. So that's something to be aware of. You know, when you're getting a rebuild kit, you actually want to get one for the D40 with the fuel cutoff solenoid, because this has one main technical difference between the SD40, and that's this actually has a power valve. So when Toyota was, you know, updating with the times and carburetors, and they developed the D40 here, they actually went with a power valve in this single barrel carburetor. So what's cool about this that the SD40 doesn't have, even though this is, of course, the coveted period correct carburetor, is the power valve. And so what the power valve does is, you know, when you're really giving the engine the berries there and it's really bogged down, and that manifold vacuum pressure drops, when that manifold pressure drops and you're opening a throttle valve, and the engine's lugging there, the power valve opens, allowing fuel to flow past the main jets and add more supplemental fuel into the intake into the engine. And so that gives the engine the fuel it needs, you know, when it's really when it's under load. So that's a real nice technical upgrade that the D40 has over the SD40. Some other you know, smaller items that Toyota did to update the D40 over the SD40 was the check balls inside are free floating versus caged brass crimped cage nuts in the SD40. They obviously went to a smaller round sight glass here, so you know, it doesn't look as nice, but functionally this is smarter because, you know, a nice big plate glass in the engine bay, it's a little more susceptible to damage. And also the wall here on the fuel bowl, there's more metal, it's a little thicker, so this one is actually a little less susceptible to warpage over time compared to the SD40. So this can still warp, but it's not as common and not as bad. They also added the fuel bowl cleanout plug here that the SD40 doesn't have. They installed a press-in plug for the idle transition slot, and this has one less air horn hold down screw, which is always appreciated when, you know, servicing, taking apart these carbs. So those are some technical differences between the D40 and the SD40 here. You know, of course, between the two, everyone's going to want the SD40 because it generally looks nicer, even with the paint splatter. But, you know, the D40 is still a wonderful carb. It is a factory replacement for the SD40. If you have a D40 in your early 40 series and it has a little aluminum tag that's bolted to one of the air horn screws, if you look at the code on that tag, it'll actually tell you the code that was on the SD40 that it replaced, which is cool. so you can tell what year carburetor it replaced at the dealership. And I have one of these on my FJ40, and I found out that it was a factory replacement in 1983, which is really cool that Toyota still had these D40s in stock and were doing replacements for the SD40 when these came in for service and were obsolete. So pretty neat. So price-wise for, you know, these two carburetors, people might, of course, this is the more expensive one. It's now, I really hate to use the term, but, you know, unicorn status item for the early 40s. A lot of early 40 parts are now kind of headed that way. So sometimes the prices can be crazy. You know, the nicer examples, if they still have that colored branded plate and it's clean, maybe doesn't have paint splatter, you know, the plating is nice on the metal, they can go for, you know, I've seen them go for like $800. Definitely pricey. And then, you know, one's missing the plate like this one, a little dirtier, need a rebuild or restoration, they can go for a few $100s when you can find them. So, you know, great carburetor. The D40 here, a little more common. I've seen a couple batches of NOS one, you know, new old stock ones come up, and those can cost $200 to $400. But, you know, that's a brand new one. That's fantastic. So it's definitely a better deal, and these will work a little better, you know, just with, you know, the functional upgrades. But of course, who can deny this beauty? So anyways, those are some differences between the SD40 and the D40, a little bit of history of the SD40. If anyone has any questions, feel free to leave a comment. We're happy to help answer. We'll include some pictures in the posts on what the plates actually looked like and what to look for. And yeah, hopefully everyone enjoyed that. Hopefully everyone's having a great Saturday. Thank you for the likes and the follows, and hopefully everyone's enjoying the content. And yeah, everyone take care. Stay healthy.